theoretical, the principle, he will finish the class about this. And then there will be practical session on Zemax. I think most of you have the Zemax, maybe you have one here which is still at final solution. Maybe you can merge with one of our students today. We try to find a sustainable solution. Maybe Pandapash can attend with you. And after, so we will switch to Zemax. Today we also propose that we stop around 4:30 instead of 5 o'clock. The reason is that initially we will try to keep some time to connect the license on the computer. But since most of the people, everybody here has a Zemax, you have Zemax in your computer?
Yeah, I connected via the network.
Okay, I'm going to have a look. But since most of the people have Zemax, we don't need, I think it's better if we stop earlier today to make sure that you are not tired too much. It's a lot of knowledge to acquire in one day. So that we stop around 4:30 if it's okay. And then tomorrow we start again, if I remember, 9 or 9:30. Okay? Okay. And then we'll teach you the class. Just waiting for the problem to be solved. Let me explain you how does it work with the Zemax. Alors, I'm sorry, I thought. Si je peux projeter des choses. I just want to explain you. So I'm going to explain you a little bit how you can have access to the Zemax software. In fact, what we are using here is what we call a network license. So Zemax kindly provide us, for the duration of the workshop, 25 licenses. Okay, so they expire next, if you remember well, it's 1st August. And this is a network license. It means that you need, to make this license working, you need a license installed on one computer, the host computer, which is here. This is the host computer. Okay? And then this computer provides to your computer the licenses. So it means this is why we asked you to install Zemax on your computer, to make sure you have the computer, but you need a license to activate Zemax. You connect to the ODSS 2019 network. So the password is small letter, not capital letter, ODSS 2019. Okay. And then there is an operation to do. This is what I did this morning with your computer, to make sure that your computer can detect the license on the server. If you stop to connect to the ODSS 2019 network, you lost the license. Voilà, so in other words, the ODSS 2019 workshop network does not provide access to internet, so if you want to access internet, you must lost your connection to Zemax. Okay? Anything else? So, je te laisse continuer. Allez, I let Thierry presenting you the second part of his class for today. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I will finish this theoretical part with a very short presentation of the 5 fundamental geometric aberrations, starting with spherical aberration. So 5 aberrations means third order aberrations, you know this now. Then I will start a short presentation on quality criteria, just introducing today the SPON diagram because during the week, during the summer school, we will see other quality criteria, so we don't need to see all of them today. And then a short presentation on Zemax and practical work with a very simple optical system, which is the single lens. By the way, in this room, who never used the Optic Studio Zemax so far? Okay. Okay. So, spherical aberration, you remember, if you look to the aberration function with respect to the trajectory parameters, here only rho, which is the radial, normalized radial distance in the pupil. You remember, it is the only term which do not depend on the field. You don't have y prime here, okay? So this is the Taylor development to the third order of the aberration function, and you know, you remember, you have W040, which is the aberration, spherical aberration coefficient, and rho to the 4, rho is a normalized variable. It's comprised between 0 and 1. It is the radial distance of the output point in the exit pupil. So, as this term does not depend on the field, and if you remember, all the other terms depends on the field. Linear dependence, quadratic dependence, cubic dependence. One way to study only spherical aberration is to work on the optical axis. If you are on the optical axis, y prime is equal to 0, and using monochromatic light to cancel all chromatic aberrations, you will see chromatic aberrations tomorrow with Christophe. So, using a monochromatic light and working on the optical axis, you will have only spherical aberration. And don't forget that it does not depend on the field. It means that you can study it on the optical axis, and the results will be the same for any points in the field, as it does not depend on the field. Okay? Thank you very much. So, yes. Thank you. Okay, so this is just an illustration to show you the effect of spherical aberration. So I took a very powerful lens. It means a lens with a high aperture, or if you want, given the diameter, with a very short focal length, just to illustrate the notion of this aberration. Okay? And the object is located at infinity on the axis. Doing so, I remove completely all field aberrations, astigmatism, field curvature, distortion. And what we get is the following. You can see that if you had stigmatism, all rays in the image space should go through the paraxial image, which is located here, and you see that it is not the case. And if you look closer to this drawing, you will see that if you use paraxial rays very close to the optical axis, you remember rays with very small angle of incidence with respect to the diopters, you can see that these rays goes approximately to the paraxial image. But if you consider marginal rays, for instance this one, here you have strong angles of incidence, and you can see that here the position of the image is located here, not on the paraxial image, but here. And so, what is spherical aberration? It is an aberration for which the higher the height of incidence on the lens, and the closer the image with respect to the lens. This is spherical aberration. And so, if you put a sensor here on the paraxial image, what will you get? You will get, you see here, a bright spot in the middle here, which is the location of the paraxial image, and you will get light around as a background because of all these rays with higher heights of incidence, which will give images closer to the lens, and then that will be defocused in the image plane. So, just to show you what you will get if you make what is called in optical laboratories a star test. So you are using your instruments and you are looking to a point source, a star in the sky, or a point source which is located at the focus of a collimator. If you are doing so, in the ideal case, if you take into account the diffraction, you should get the Airy pattern. I forgot to tell you that here, this is a numerical illustration in the case where the aberration is equal to 3 wavelengths, which is quite high. Okay. So, without any aberration, you should get this Airy pattern, and with this spherical aberration, which is quite high, you get this. So you see a kind of light concentration close to the axis, and a strong background due to all the rays which focus before the paraxial image. Okay? And so, in this case, you can say that, of course, the resolution of the instrument is strongly decreased, because it means here that the width of the image is much larger than this one, so you lose in resolution, and also in the image you will lose in contrast, because you have this strong background on the sensor. Okay, so this is spherical aberration. Again, this aberration does not depend on the field, so you will get this point spread function, which is the image of the object point, whatever the field. Okay. So, how to correct this aberration? There are 2 techniques. The first one is the compensation. I mentioned it this morning. The idea is to associate 2 components with opposite defaults. And using the theorem of Gouy, aiding the wavefront aberrations, you will, theoretically, cancel the default. So, there are many applications. The most simple one is the doublet, with many variations. One of the type, which is very well known, is the Schmidt telescope. I will not give you the details here, but if you want to know how it's working, I can give you many more explanations. But roughly, the idea is that you need a telescope with a high field of view, so you need a very short focal length. So you need to use a spherical mirror with a high aperture. High aperture means high aberrations, and the idea is to put just before the main primary mirror a kind of lens, an aspheric lens, which will introduce a spherical aberration which will cancel the spherical aberration of the primary mirror.
Could you draw it, please?
Yeah. So, to build a Schmidt telescope, which is a high-field telescope, you need a spherical mirror with a very short focal length with respect to the diameter. So aperture number typically close to 2. So the focal length is 2 times the diameter of the mirror. So this is the ideal case given by the geometrical optics. The incident rays coming from an object located at infinity on the optical axis will go through the paraxial focus, but due to the high aperture, you will have a strong spherical aberration. So it means that for high heights of incidence, you will have a real focus which will be closer to the component, as I explained you before. And so the real image will be here. And so in the image plane, you will have a strong defocus. And to compensate this, the idea is to put in front of the mirror a kind of negative lens. Negative lens, I mean with a power opposite to the power of the main primary mirror. And this lens will introduce a spherical aberration which is opposite to the spherical aberration of the main primary mirror. And doing this, at the end, you will have a perfect instrument. I mean, for this given input ray, you will have a focal point which will be located on the paraxial image F prime. So it's called the Schmidt telescope, and it was used mainly by professional astronomers during the 60s and the 70s. And in the 80s, this kind of telescope almost completely disappeared. And by this time, professional astronomers started to use a kind of Cassegrain telescope, which is called Richier-Chrétien telescope, with a better correction of geometric aberrations. So here you see you have a limited number of optical surfaces. And especially here, you cannot play on the shape of a mirror. This is a spherical mirror. So if you want to optimize this instrument, the only degree of freedom is the shape of this diopter here. This is here a plane diopter. So you have only 1 degree of freedom to optimize the telescope. And with 1 degree of freedom, you will correct only 1 geometric aberrations, especially here, the spherical aberration. If you move to a Richier-Chrétien Cassegrain telescope, you will have 2 mirrors. It means 2 degrees of freedom, and you will be able to correct both spherical aberration and coma. And so the optical quality will be better. And nowadays, we start to see in different projects for astronomy and space 3 mirror telescopes. Always the same idea, 3 mirrors, 3 degrees of freedom, and you can correct spherical aberration, coma, and astigmatism. And you can increase the optical quality, increase the aperture, increase the field. Okay, and the other way to correct the default, the spherical aberration, is to change the shape of the mirror. For the Schmidt telescope, the primary mirror was a spherical mirror, and you had to add a negative lens, which is a Schmidt plate corrector, to correct the spherical aberration, but there is another way to correct the defaults, which is the following. So again, starting with a spherical mirror, with a high aperture. So again, you are using a high aperture mirror. So there is a strong spherical aberration. It means that the higher the height of incidence, the closer the focal point for each ray. Okay, you know this now. If you think a little bit about this, and if you imagine how to modify the shape of a mirror to compensate for this effect, if you fold, imagine that mentally, you can fold the mirror a little bit. So, for instance, here locally, here, if you take the mirror and put it like this, a little bit, you will rotate the reflected beam. And with a good rotation, you can send the reflected beam on the paraxial image. So, here, you will send the reflected beam here. Okay? And for another beam like this, same idea, you apply a small rotation, smaller than the previous one, to send the reflected beam on the paraxial image, and so forth. And if you analyze the shape that you will obtain doing this locally for each ray, finally, at the end, you will get this kind of shape. You see? So you start with a spherical mirror. You go in the optical shop. Some people will polish your mirror and remove matter, and the higher the incidence, the height of incidence, the more materials you will have to remove, and finally you will get this shape, and for this shape you are sure that all the reflected beams will go through the paraxial image. And what you get, you know this, is, what is the shape of this mirror? A parabola. And the parabola is not a spherical surface, it is an aspheric surface. It means a non-spheric surface. So, just for one single spherical mirror, if you make a parabolization at the optical shop, you will get a stigmatic surface. You will have a perfect conjugation between an infinite object point located at infinity and the paraxial image. This is what is called aspheric surfaces. This is only the general idea, but nowadays, for instance, for lens for photography, usually in any lens now you have 2 or 3 aspheric surfaces to get high image quality. So here, for compensation and aspheric surfaces, I introduce these notions for spherical aberrations, but keep in mind that you can use these techniques for any geometric aberrations.
Does that like introduce distortion or something?
Of course, we can show theoretically that it is not possible to find an aspheric surface which will correct all geometric aberrations at the same time. So you have to choose which default you will correct. So you are right. For instance, in the case of the parabola, you remove spherical aberration, but now with a given parabola, if you work in the field with an object outside of the optical axis, you will have coma, astigmatism, distortion, and so on. So you can find some cases for which, for instance, you correct spherical aberration, but you increase distortion, for instance. So it's a problem of, it's the general problem of compensations. With respect to your specifications, you have to choose which default you want to correct, and what kind of default you are ready to accept with respect to the other geometric aberrations.
Excuse me. Could you please tell which lenses with aspheric surfaces can give us a perfect image?
I will show you this with a practical example in Zemax,
Okay.
with a single lens.
Okay.
So it will be very practical for you.
I heard about two examples.
So now coma, do you remember? For the coma, looking to the acceleration function, you get this term with which is linear to the field. Here you have the aperture to the 3 and the sign of the argument in the pupil. Okay, so you have here a default which is proportional to the field. So if you consider this default alone, without spherical aberration, astigmatism, and so on, if you are working only on this default, you will get this kind of results. So this was done with Zemax. This is a very simple lens. We will see this later in the afternoon with a practical example. This is a plano-convex lens here. And to be sure that there is only coma and not spherical aberration, I put an aspherization on the first diopter to remove the spherical aberration. And working with a very little field, you see the colors here are not the wavelengths. They are the fields. So blue is on axis and red is the maximum field. So if I work with a very small field, as like this, I will be sure that coma will be much greater than astigmatism and much greater than distortion. So I'm sure that the main default in the field is coma. And I put an aspherization on the lens to remove spherical aberration. So if I plot the spot diagram of this lens, working, you see here, with a typical field which is close to a few degrees, you will get this very typical shape for the image of a point. You see here this shape, which is very close to the shape of a comet in the sky, hence the name coma. Okay? Okay. What is very interesting here is that if you consider now this lens and if you reverse the lens and again put an aspherization on this surface to remove the spherical aberration, with the same field you will get a much stronger coma with the typical shape which is given here. So it is not the main topic of this presentation here, but it is just to recall you that when you use a lens in an optical laboratory, you have to take care about the orientation of the component. There is always a good orientation with small defaults and a bad orientation with high defaults. So take care when you take a lens, this and this are not equivalent for an optical conjugation. Okay.
I have a question. It's have the same focal length,
Yes.
even with
Same focal length, same aperture, same field. The only difference between these two lenses is the aspherization to remove the spherical aberration. Because mathematically we can show that it is not the same aspherization. But anyway, whatever the aspherization, we removed the spherical aberration. And so, with a small field, we see only coma, and you see that the shape and the magnitude of the coma will depend on the orientation of the lens, which is very important. So, this is typically what is coma, and if you make a simulation as before, I was using MATLAB to do this, of this test, which is known as the star test. So you take your instrument and you are looking to a point source located at infinity. What will you get for the image, the point spread function, in the real case with the same magnitude for the default, 3 wavelengths of coma? What you will get is this comet shape, you see, with diffraction rings, because here we take into account the diffraction. So you see the ideal case and the real case. And again, the real image is larger, hence you decrease the resolution of the instrument. By the way, of course, here I assume that I have only coma, and before, you remember, we had only spherical aberration, but in real life you will have a mix of all aberrations, so it will be worse, of course. Okay, astigmatism. Astigmatism, it is a very funny effect. So this is a mirror or a lens working in the field. So looking at an object here located at infinity in the field, outside of the optical axis. And the idea is the following. You have to consider, to analyze the astigmatism, you have to consider 2 different planes. The first one contains the blue rays. It is the plane of incidence. It contains the optical axis and the object. It is called the plane of incidence, okay? Or the tangential plane, okay? And you will also consider the plane which is perpendicular and which contains the optical axis too. It corresponds to the red rays here, and it is called the sagittal plane. So, considering these 2 planes, if you analyze the focalization of the rays for the different rays, you will see that here, for instance, in the sagittal plane, the focalization will be located here on the paraxial image. But on the contrary, for the blue rays in the plane of incidence, the focalization will be closer to the lens. So depending on the plane, you will have two possible focalization, two images. This is what is called astigmatism. And so if you take a screen and if you shift the screen along the axis, the mean axis of the beam, in the plane of the paraxial image, you will have this kind of point spread function, the image of a point, which is a vertical line here. It is called the sagittal focal surface. And if you move your screen closer to the lens, in this region, you will get almost a circular point spread function. And here, you will get an horizontal focal line, which is called the tangential focal surface. To illustrate this, again, here, this is the ideal image, the Airy pattern. So in the plane of the paraxial image with astigmatism, so again, I took 3 wavelengths of astigmatism to illustrate the effect here. So if I put the screen, the sensor, in the plane of the paraxial image, I will get a vertical line like this, with the diffraction fringes around. And if I move the sensor toward the lens, I will have here the focus for the beams inside the plane of incidence, okay? And just between the two, for third order astigmatism, you will get a point spread function which is almost circular. So usually we call this the best geometric image. But of course, if you compare this and this, it is obvious that here the response is larger, hence the resolution is smaller, of course.
Excuse me, could you go to the previous slide, please? This green images, it is how slot diagram looks like.
Yes.
With only asymmetry.
Yes. Okay. So here, these are spot diagrams. So we are using only geometrical optics, and we analyze the impacts of the rays in the image plane. And here, this is a modeling taking into account the diffraction. And so this is why you see all these fringes here. These are the real responses. What you could see if you put your eye, for instance, between the eyepiece, looking to a star, to analyze the quality of your instrument.
These images were modeled with Zemax?
Yes. No, with MATLAB, but you can do almost the same with Zemax.
Okay.
This is only MATLAB. It is very easy. You put. You know what is the optical path difference, and so you can compute very easily the PSF, knowing this. I will give you details later if you want, because it is.
The previous slide, I'm wondering the type of lens, that one.
Any lens, if you take any lens, positive, negative, any mirror, working in the field, you will get this kind of default.
It seems like it is not symmetric with the vertical and the horizontal plane, or I don't understand why it has different. It should be the cone with the one focus and the another focus.
Yes.
Here it seems like
You lose rotational symmetry because in fact, the object is not located on the optical axis. So you have a plane of symmetry. The plane of incidence with the blue rays is a plane of symmetry, but you don't have any more rotational symmetry because the object point is not located on the axis. And this is also the case of coma, for instance.
This error is come from manufacturing the lens, right? That's only.
So, yes, very interesting. This default is
the astigmatism is.
mainly due to the fact that you are using spherical shapes for the diopters. But, very interesting, this default could be introduced by manufacturing errors or assembly errors. For instance, if you take a very good mirror and put it in a barrel with high constraints, you induce astigmatism. And it is exactly the same as this one. Okay. So you can get this due to the shape of the component, due to the fabrication, and also due to the assembly. Okay?
So it will not generate like this if in the theory for the spherical or parabolic, it will not have the astigmatism like this. Just only when we assemble the lens or make a
Yes.
manufacturing.
Yes.
Or,
For instance, to give you a practical example, imagine that here this is a big primary mirror for a big telescope. Due to the gravity, if you are looking to an object which is located quite low in the sky, due to the gravity, you will have stronger constraints in this direction with respect to this direction. So here, the radius of curvature of the mirror will be smaller in this direction with respect to this direction. So for a static mirror used for astronomy with a typical diameter greater than 70, 80 centimeters, only due to the gravity you will induce astigmatism. And one way to correct it is to use a very specific barrel for the mirror with actuators to make an active deformation of a mirror which will depend on the direction of observation. So this is done very typically with very large telescopes, 8-10 meters. You have actuators under the mirror, and you compensate in real time the deformation of the optical surface. And to do this, of course, you need to use very thin mirrors. I don't know if you know this, but for very large telescope in Scheil, 8.4 meter diameter telescope, the thickness of a mirror is only 17 centimeter. 8.4 meter diameter and only 17 centimeter for the thickness.
at the edge.
And so
center?
it
Yes, at the edge or the center of the
everywhere. And so it is quite easy
to
to modify the shape of a mirror with special actuators.
Does this mirror, what you're talking about, have form like this? Was lightened up like this?
This shape, I don't know how you say this in English.
cellular.
Cellular. Okay.
No, how to tell.
Okay. It was used years ago
Yes.
when astronomers used thick mirrors. It was used to reduce the weight of the mirror. But nowadays, the idea is to use very thin mirrors in order to be able to change the shape with active optics. Okay?
We use these constructions till now in Russia.
In special cases, but generally now the tendency is to use thin mirrors. to be able to modify their shapes. Okay, I showed you the point spread functions for astigmatism. And next default is field curvature, which is given by this relationship if you are looking to the aberration function. So again, same field dependence with respect to astigmatism. This is a quadratic variation with respect to the field. But before, for astigmatism, you had this sign square here, which was one reason for the non-rotational symmetry, which I explained just before. And now you don't have any sign here, which means that here you have something with rotational symmetry. So what is field curvature in a very ideal case, and assuming that again you have only field curvature alone, no spherical aberration, no coma, no astigmatism. So this is a component which would have only field curvature. The idea is the following. You see, if you are looking to objects located at infinity on the axis or in the field, the idea is that if you have only field curvature, you will get perfect images, whatever the field. So here, a point in geometrical optics or an airy pattern, if you take into account the diffraction. Here in the field, again, a perfect image, but if you are looking closer to this drawing here, you see that all the images are not located in a plane, which was the paraxial plane image, but now all the images are located on spherical plane at third order. If you are working with higher orders, the shape is not spherical, but at third order, the shape is spherical. So you see the field image plane is not plane. Hence the name field curvature. The field has a curvature. This is an effect which has to be corrected because you know that nowadays we are using solid-state sensors, CCD, CMOS, and you see that, for instance, for a field point which is located here, and with respect to the paraxial image, you have a small defocus here. And so you need to compensate this effect. And so you need to use special techniques that I will explain you, and I think that you will have much more details with Christophe on the correction of field curvature. Okay. So remember, for field curvature, whatever the field, you get a perfect image, but the higher the field, the higher the defocus with respect to the plane of the paraxial image. We introduce a defocus which depends on the field, which is proportional to the square of the field. Okay. And last default. Excuse me. Just before we studied astigmatism and field curvature separately, but in real life, they are always mixed. Why? It's very simple, because you have the same field dependence. So in real life, you cannot separate astigmatism and field curvature. So what will you get if you consider both aberrations? So the idea is here. It's a schematic, but I hope that it will be clear enough for you. So this is the optical system. This is the exit pupil. And here this is a field ray. You remember? Field rays goes through the center of the pupils. This is a field ray. And this angle is the field angle, half field angle. Okay, so for a given field here, you will get astigmatism. It means that rays in the plane of the screen, which is the plane of incidence, will focus here, and rays in the plane which is perpendicular, the horizontal plane, which contains the optical axis, these rays will focus here. So you will have two different images in the two perpendicular planes, okay? And if you add field curvature, in fact, these two focal lines, so this focal line is perpendicular to the plane of the screen, and this one is in the plane of the screen, you see? This is the tangential focal line, this is the sagittal focal line here. And if you add field curvature, and if you change the field angle here, these two lines will be located on two surfaces which will be at third order spherical. So you have both astigmatism and field curvature here, but you will have different values of the field curvatures depending on which image you are studying. Okay? And between the two here, you remember, you have almost in the middle here the best geometrical image. And in practical cases, you can have almost anything. So here, this case illustrated here with curvature for the tangential line and a curvature with the same sign for the sagittal line here. In this case, you have no curvature for the sagittal line. It means that whatever the field, the sagittal line is always located in the plane of the paraxial image here. And in this case, which is very interesting, you have astigmatism, of course, because given a field, you will get two different images for tangential and sagittal rays, but you see that the best geometrical image here is located in the paraxial image plane. It means that here you have astigmatism, but you have no field curvature. You have a compensation with respect to the curvature of the field here. And the best case would be to get here and here infinite zero curvatures in order to get these red surfaces located in the plane of the paraxial image. So in this case, you won't have any astigmatism, and you won't have any field curvature. This would be the ideal case if you work very well with the software.
Excuse me. In which cases, or in which situations these cases take place?
Alors, these are very general behaviors. It's very difficult to assign each drawing to a specific case, but this case is very well known. This is the case of the spherical mirror I told you before, working with an object located at infinity. If you consider this mirror, you will get this kind of behavior for astigmatism and field curvature.
What
So-
about third case? What about third case?
This case would be what you could obtain if you get a compensation of curvatures between the two focal lines in this case. So doing this, you cancel the field curvature, but still you get astigmatism. It means that you will have to work a little bit more with the software to try to cancel here the curvatures of these two surfaces.
How could we compensate astigmatism?
In the general case, there is no easy trick to apply to correct it. It's not so easy as, for instance, for spherical aberration. Spherical aberration, we know that aspherization, for instance, is a very efficient technique to reduce this default. But for astigmatism, it's not so obvious.
Okay.
So most of the time, people are working with their software. They put enough variables in the software, and they hope that the correction will be better than their starting point. But there are no direct tricks. You see?
Yes.
Of course, with very specific systems, I don't know all the details, but if you're working only with doublet, triplets, and so on, there are some recipes, very well known, but in the general case, there is no simple trick, so you have to play with the software. There are no other possibilities.
Okay.
So, I will go very fast with this slide because Christophe will explain you what it is very soon, this week. This is a way to correct spherical aberration, field curvature, excuse me. So you have a telescope here with a surface image which is not plane here. And you would like to have a plane image surface in order to use a classical solid state sensor. And the idea here is to use negative lens. If you are using a conversion system, you will use a kind of negative lens which will be located very close to the image. Christophe will explain you later why. And doing this, in fact, you are doing compensation. I mean that the field curvature of the lens will compensate the field curvature of the telescope. At the end, theoretically, you will get a plane surface image. So these devices are called field correctors, and they are used to correct aberration in the field, mainly field curvature, but also a little bit coma and astigmatism. Okay, so for the details, you have to wait a little bit. Okay, and distortion, to finish this part of the presentation, without too much details. So, too many details, excuse me. So, the idea is the following. You are looking to this kind of object. This is a grid. Okay, regular grid here. You make the image of this grid with the optical system, which has optical distortion alone. In the general case, you will get a perfect image. I will explain you what does it mean, perfect image. But the shape of the grid will be modified. You will get this shape, and this kind of distortion is called pincushion, or this shape. This is a barrel distortion here. In both cases, the image is perfect in the sense that, you see, the image, for instance, of this point is this point. So, as for field curvature, the image of a point is a point. But you remember, for field curvature, you had the focus which depend on the cube of the field. And again, here it is the same. The image of this point is this point. So in the image plane, you have a transverse aberration. So the transverse position of the image is not located on the paraxial image. You have a small shift of the image with respect to the position of the ideal image, and this shift is proportional to the field to the cube. So it strictly speaking, as for field curvature, it is not an optical aberration because you keep the resolution. The image of a point is a point or an iridis, but it's simply the position of the image which is not given by the geometrical optics. For field curvature, you have a defocus, which is proportional to the square of the field, and for distortion, you have a lateral transverse shift, which is proportional to the cube of the field. So this is a very specific aberration, and again, as for astigmatism, there are no very simple tricks, rules to apply to correct this effect, apart from very simple cases as for the single lens, for instance. For a photographic lens, for instance, it is quite complicated to make the correction. You can use aspherization, but if you use aspherization to reduce the distortion, you will not be able to correct completely the spherical aberration. So you have to find a good compensation with respect to your optical specifications.
Excuse me. If we plot the spot diagram in each location, it will be a dot. Right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
I will show you this in CMAX. So you will get. Excuse me. You will get a point. This point will, of course, be imaged here. This point will be imaged here, and so on. So you will get a cloud of points. Okay. So the image is very sharp, but the shape is different. You cannot superpose the image and the object. We say that the optical system is non-orthoscopic. You have a deformation of the image with respect to the object. Okay, so for chromatic aberrations, Christophe will introduce you this tomorrow. Okay. So, for quality criteria for an optical system, I just want today, this afternoon, for the example we are going to use in a few minutes, I just want to introduce you the spot diagram, but I gave you already some explanations about this. So you remember, this is the image plane here. And with respect to the paraxial image, which is located here on the spot, you have impacts around, close to the paraxial image, but not on the paraxial image due to the geometric aberrations. And you quantify the position of the impacts with what is called the transverse aberrations. And the whole cloud here is called a spot diagram. So you can get it very easily with the software. And one way to quantify the quality here is to measure the size of this cloud. So you can measure with Optics Studio two parameters. The first one is what is called the geometric size, which is here in this case the total diameter. Okay. Which is not always relevant, because in this case, for example, for spherical aberration, you see that you have a strong concentration of points around the optical axis. And you have a much lower energy which is deposited around the paraxial image. So it would be better to measure the size of this region here. And you do this by analyzing what is called the RMS spot size, which is a better quality criteria in this case, when you don't have homogeneous density of impacts in the image plane. So this root mean square value is defined as classical RMS values. Okay, so these are the coordinates of impacts, the transverse aberrations. This is the mean position. So in this case, for spherical aberration, the mean value here is, of course, 0 for x and 0 for y. Okay, this is the position of the paraxial image. And n is the number of points that you consider here, the number of impacts. Okay, and so you can deduce these RMS values, which will give you an idea of the way on how energy is concentrated around the paraxial image. So it is a better quality criteria. You will see this later, especially with Christophe, because in astronomy, people, for optical specifications, are mainly using these RMS values.
Excuse me, the RMS value is the value between 0 to 1, or is maybe 2
No.
or 3?
No. For the geometric size here, you take, for instance, this point, you know the coordinates. You take this point, you know the coordinates, and you deduce the diameter, which is the total diameter of the spot diagram. But for the RMS value, in fact, it's a root mean square value, and so you take into account the fact that the density of impacts is not uniform in the image plane. And so you see here the density is higher in this area, and so you will get a smaller value, which will be
Smaller.
a kind of representation of the way on how the energy is concentrated in the image plane. So you will get a smaller value. I don't know, for the RMS spot size in this case, probably you will get something like this for the diameter.
So the smaller value is better, or?
It's different. Of course, the aim of the optical design work is to get the smallest value of the RMS spot size and the smallest value of the geometric spot size. But for this case, if you get this spot diagram, you get a given value of the RMS spot size, which is not the ideal size. You would like to have something smaller, of course. But the RMS size is always smaller than the geometric size.
Okay.
Could you repeat this? What is centroid?
Centroid is the center of gravity of this cloud. So, for instance, if you are using, studying spherical aberration, you have rotational symmetry because you remember the image point is located on the axis, and so the center of gravity of this cloud is obviously located on the paraxial image here.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we will see later during the week other quality criteria. One involves the aberration function, so I will give you details later about this quality criteria. And when we will study the Cook triplet, I will introduce you what is called the modulation transfer function, MTF, which is a very powerful quality criteria to quantify the optical quality of your system. But so far, for us this afternoon, this one is sufficient. So, of course, the aim, as I told you before, is to get the smallest spot diagram, because don't remember, in the ideal case, in geometrical optics, the image of a point is a point. The size of the point is equal to 0. And if you take into account the diffraction, you get an airy disk, which is quite small. You know probably the theoretical size of the airy pattern. But in all cases, the aim is to get the smallest spot diagram to be close to the what is called diffraction limit, the airy pattern. Okay, so a few words about Zemax, especially for people who never used the software before. So I don't know if you know, but the software changed. It was called Zemax a few years ago, and now it is called Optics Studio. But the company is still Zemax. J'avance peut-être un petit peu, on fait un petit break et on attaque sur le logiciel. So, a few words about what you will have to do, not in the summer school because we don't have enough time to do this, but if you were an optical designer working in a laboratory or in a company, your work could be analyzed in different steps. First of all, you will have to define the optical specifications of your system. For instance, what could be the focal length, what could be the aperture, what is the spectral domain for the application, visible, near infrared, middle infrared, far infrared, and so on. You could add, I don't know, the total mass of the optical system, the volume, the size, the optical quality. I would like a spot diagram which is smaller than 1 pixel of my camera. So, for instance, smaller than 10 microns, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, you will have to define what will be your specifications. So you can do this alone, or if you are working in a company, you can discuss with your customer to define together what will be your specifications. Then you will start the optical design, and we will study this step during the summer school. So the idea is the following. You know the aperture, the field, the wavelengths, and so on. So how to start? What can I use to start the problem? Do I need a doublet, a triplet, 2-mirror telescope, a microscope objective? So this is a very important question, the question of the starting point. And to do this, you can use special books. So Christophe will bring tomorrow one very famous book from Smith, Modern Lens Design, and you will see, okay. So, okay. You can use patents in special websites. You can see all patents, because usually nowadays people prefer to not to publish their designs, especially in private companies. But you can find many old patents before the 50s or the 70s. You can have some starting point given by the softwares. There is a special package in Optics Studio which is called ZBase. It is a collection of more than 600 starting points which can help you to start your design. And you can use, of course, your expertise or the expertise of your colleagues and so on. So this is the most important point, because when you know how to start, after the software will work for you almost. I told you this morning that he cannot do anything, but he will do the most important part of your work, but he will not be able to start the work for you. If you don't know how to start, you can wait for many years. Optic Studio won't tell you if you need to use a doublet or a triplet. Okay? After this, what you will get is an ideal optical system which will meet your specifications. So after this, you would like to fabricate and to assemble your optical system. But when you will fabricate and assemble the system, you will introduce errors, fabrication errors, assembly errors. And these errors will decrease the level of performance of your theoretical system. And so there is a step which is called tolerancing. We will study this tomorrow afternoon together. The idea is to introduce errors in the software to study how the performance will decrease with a given level of error. So this is a very important step, because it is only after this step that you will know if you can fabricate your system. And during this step, you can take into account, of course, fabrication errors, assembly errors, and also environmental considerations such as variation of temperature, vibrations, and so on. After this, you need to study the radiometry of your optical system, and especially, very important, to analyze the stray light of your optical system. So Christophe will explain you in a few days what is stray light and how to analyze this parasitic light, which will create on your sensor a kind of background which will decrease the contrast in the image. So you need to analyze this effect, and you need to reduce, if possible, the effect of the stray light. Next step, you have finished with the modeling. You will start the fabrication of all the components, optical components and mechanical components. So you need to work with people working in optical shop and mechanical shop, and you will study the optomechanical design, how to mount the components in barrels, how to define the mechanical structure of the whole instrument, which kind of optical tube assembly, and so on and so on. Then you will fabricate all the components, you will assemble them, and finally, the last step will be to control that for your system, the specifications, you meet the specifications that you defined in the first step. So you see, you have many steps from the idea to the optical system that you can use in your laboratory, in your observatory, and so on. So optical design in the general definition is wide spectrum activity. It's very interesting. You are not only doing simulation with a computer, but you will have to work with optical optical and mechanical shops. You will have to work in your optical laboratory to make some tests and so on. So it is a very interesting activity, and you will cover all the subfields of optical engineering. This is why this is a very interesting activity.
Excuse me. The design also have include the baffle.
Yes. This is the problem of the stray light.
Okay.
So Christophe will probably introduce you this later. So, returning only to this step for us, optical design. What is optical design? So I explain you that you have to start with a starting point. So, for instance, imagine that given your specifications, you need to use a triplet. This is a Cooke triplet. We will study this in details at the end of the week. This is a Cooke triplet with two positive lenses located on both sides of a negative lens here. You have a pupil, intermediate pupil here. And you see this, this optical instrument has quite a high aperture, close to 3, 4, and you see the field here, typically for the half field, 15, 20 degrees. Okay, so you use books, patents, expertise with your colleagues, whatever you want. You know your starting point. And if you analyze the performance of your optical system, this is the modulation transfer function, you see that for the starting point, given your specifications, of course, the level of performance is very low at the beginning. So the idea is to optimize the shape of the components. I mean, the radius curvatures of the lenses, the thicknesses of the lenses, the thicknesses of the air spaces, eventually the materials, if you want to correct the chromatic aberrations, and at the end you would like to get a system, you see here, looking to the MTF, with quite high values of MTF, close to the diffraction limit, which is the black curve here. Okay? And so you see, between the starting point and the final design, the shape is quite different. See, the front lens is bigger, the airspace here at the end is greater, and so on. Okay, so this is the starting point, and after optimization, playing with the radius curvatures, the thicknesses, and the materials, you get something which meet your specifications. So what about the softwares? The two main softwares nowadays are Code 5 and Optic Studio. There is a third one which is called Oslo, but which is not used by many people in the world now. The major two are Code 5 and Optic Studio. So, for the principle, they are working in the same way. I mean that if you know one software, you are able to use any other software. Of course, you will have some changes with the menus and so on, but the philosophy, the general philosophy is the same for all optical software so far. They are working in the same way. So, they are all using what we call construction parameters. I mean, radius curvatures for the lenses and mirrors, thicknesses, materials, air thicknesses, materials to change the indices of refractions, the R numbers, and so on. And the idea is to play with these construction parameters to get, I told you before, the smallest spot diagrams for all the points in the field. Okay? Just a warning here for the optimization. with optimization, you will not do any miracle. So, if you don't know what is optical design, if you don't have a good knowledge of a theory and a good knowledge of practice, even with the best software, you will not be able to obtain a good optical system. So, you need to be a good designer and to use a good software to get a good result. It's very important. Probably in 10 years or 5 or 10 years it will be different, because nowadays people are working with, artificial intelligence, and a few teams in the world so far are working on application of artificial intelligence for optical design. I started this work with one of my PhD students a few months ago. And the idea is that in the future, I don't know, 5, 10 years, probably you will have softwares which will be able to work almost alone. So the dream would be to give to the software the specifications, and after, the software alone will be able to determine the starting point, to make the optimization, but with much more powerful methods than the one which are used today. And finally, if you get many results, the software should be able to choose the best design with respect with, for instance, the tolerancing, the ease of fabrication, I don't know, any criteria. Okay? But so far it is not possible, so no miracle, and especially if you want to optimize with respect to the chromatic aberrations. Christophe will explain you that it is better to do this by yourself, by hand, with the software, because if you optimize in the automatic mode of the software, most of the time you will get materials which don't exist in real life. So it is not very interesting most of the time. So you will get results faster by doing correction of chromatic aberration by yourself, with the help of the software, of course, but you will change yourself the materials with some criteria that Christophe will explain you later. Okay, so the principle, the basic principle of software is the following. You define the position of the object in the object space, on the axis, in the field, okay? You launch rays from the object to the image through the optical system, and for each ray on each diopter, you apply the Schnell-Descartes relationship. Okay? And in the computer, I told you this morning that the problem with optical conjugation is that you will have higher orders, third, fifth, and so on, which will introduce optical aberrations. And what is very interesting with softwares is that you can take into account directly very high orders. So you can determine very precisely the real shape of the image, taking into account hundreds of orders directly. Okay, so this is the basic principle. A few words about the optimization. So the idea is to define what is called the merit function error, MFE. I will show you this in Zemax. In fact, what is the MFE? In a very simple case, it's very simple. Here, you have what is called an operand in Zemax. And this could be, for instance, the focal length, or the spherical aberration, or the coma, or anything. So we call this, in the general case, default. Okay? It is described by an operand in Emacs. Okay. This is the target value of this default. For instance, I would like to have a focal length equal to 100 millimeter. Okay. So you will consider a difference, and you will make the quadratic sum of all these differences. So with the focal length, the spherical aberration, the comma, whatever you want. Okay? Here, the defaults will depend on the construction parameters. So this value EI will depend on all the radii of curvatures, all the thicknesses, all the materials, and the idea is to play with all the construction parameters to find the lowest value of this merit function. Because theoretically, if you are able to find a perfect system, it means that each default will meet the targeted value. So here you will get 0 in the ideal case. So to make the optimization, you will play, not you, but the software, will play with your construction parameters, and you will try to find the smallest value here. Usually, most of the time, with a starting point, you will be anywhere on this. Okay, here you think that it is only a single curve, but you can have tens or hundreds of construction parameters. So it is a very tricky shape. For a doublet, for instance, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 construction parameters. So you are working in a space with 7 dimensions. Okay? And the idea is to play with all the possible combination of construction parameters to find the lowest value of the merit function. But when you start with a given starting point, usually you start with very high value of merit function, and when you make the optimization, usually you find the closest minima, which is not the absolute minima. And so when you reach with this first valley here, with the software, you will stay in this valley. And it will be difficult to go here and to go here. So there are some tricks that we will try to explain you during the summer school on how to reach the lowest valley. In the ideal case. In the ideal case, because most of the time the problem is that you don't know where is this valley, of course. Because I explain you, well, even with a simple doublet, 7 parameters, the shape of this function in 7 dimensions is very complicated. So you don't know if there is a very deep valley, and you don't know where it is. This is why this is very tricky. And this is why you need a strong expertise, years of practice to be able to get very good optical systems. Okay. I will comment this later. Just a few words about free softwares, because I guess that not everybody has access to Code 5 or Emacs. So in my documents, I updated some links where you will be able to find some almost free, not very cheap. Here it's close to 100 euros, so almost free. Some free softwares to make optical design. So, of course, as there are three, they have some limitations. For instance, for this software, which is very used for education, the main limitation is the number of diopters that you will use. It is limited to 10. 10, it means, for instance, 5 lenses. It's quite interesting. Okay? But with any of these softwares, you will be able at least to start designs with geometrical optics. And in very simple cases, you will be able to start the first optimizations and to have an idea of which optical quality you can get with a better software. So if you have the opportunity, don't forget that you can use some of these. For each one, you have a complete documentation online also.
Which one do you advise us to use?
This is a hard question. Probably the first two.
Is it friendly use?
Yes, yes. For the how you say ergonomy, practical use with Windows and so on, the best are this one and this one. This one is from Germany, Jena, colleagues from Jena. LT for limited, and this one. This one is not bad too. It is very close to Code 5 and Optic Studio. And the worst is this one. This is the oldest one. It was written in Fortran 20 or 30 years ago. It is very powerful, but the interface is very simple. Very, very simple. Okay.
How about XMOS? XMOS is okay?
These two were written by amateur astronomers.
Italy.
Yes, and they are not bad. Yes, you can check on their websites. They are quite good. Yes, and I'm not sure that there are limitations for the number of diopters here, but the most important part of an optical design software is this part. How you use algorithms to do optimization. This is what makes the price of the software. So Code 5 and Zemax have quite powerful methods of optimization. Based on this method, which is the, I didn't tell you this before, the least square optimization here. This is a very old method, you know, quite efficient when you have a small number of variables. For these softwares, I don't know how the optimization is done, but probably they are less powerful to make optimization, especially for complex systems.
Excuse me, does Optic Studio have something like student's license, something like that?
It depends on the countries, but I know that for France, for instance, this special program will start this summer. It's new. Yes, in September, for my students, they will be able to get free, full licenses.
Okay.
Probably this program was already done for US and some other countries years ago, but it will start this summer in France.
Okay.
And for Russia, I don't know.
Okay. That's
And for Code 5, it depends. For Russia, you know ITMO in St. Petersburg?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Probably my colleague, I forgot her name, but probably have free licenses of Code 5 and Zemax there, because there is a very well-known school of optical design in this university. In Moscow, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, understood.
Perhaps, I don't know. Okay, so we can make a short break and then start with the first very simple example with Zemax.